Hi guys. Zach stared at the empty glass in front of him, the amber whiskey swirling gently as he rolled it between his fingers. The apartment felt strangely quiet, despite the muffled sounds of the city outside. He took another sip, his mind a tornado of anger and disbelief. He hadn't planned on this. He never wanted to be here. But Emma had left him no choice. The moment he found out about her affair with Alex, his best friend, his confidant, it felt like the ground beneath him had been ripped away. It was one of those moments where time seemed to stretch on endlessly, each second a razor-sharp slice into his chest. He had suspected something for a while, but he'd never imagined it could be true, never imagined the depth of the betrayal. The messages. The secret meetings. The lies. It all became clear the moment he opened her phone and saw their conversations, the photos, the plans they'd made behind his back. He had confronted her, of course. Her face had fallen when he showed her the evidence. There was no defense, no apology that could make it right. She was guilty and she knew it. But what cut deeper than anything was the look in her eyes, defensive, but almost proud. As if she had found something in Alex that she hadn't found in him. That was the part he couldn't get out of his mind. Though he wanted revenge. He wanted to make her feel the same raw agony he was drowning in, the hollow pit in his chest that threatened to swallow him whole. But revenge wasn't as simple as just screaming, or crying, or confronting her again. It needed to be something deeper, something more cutting. That's when he met Lily. It wasn't planned. He hadn't gone out seeking someone, but there she was. A woman who knew nothing about him, about his marriage, about Emma. She was an escape, a brief moment of diversion, but also a weapon. Zach had gone to the bar, trying to drown his thoughts in alcohol and forget the gnawing betrayal in his gut. And then Lily had sat down beside him, her presence sharp but not overwhelming. Her smile was friendly, warm even. There was no immediate spark, no intense chemistry or irresistible attraction. She was just there. Zach could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing on him, but he couldn't ignore the pull of the situation. He didn't want someone he could connect with emotionally. He didn't want love or affection. He didn't even care if Lily was attractive or kind. He needed her because she was a tool, a distraction, an object to help him hurt Emma the way he was hurting. So he invited her back to his place. There was no talk of their pasts, no real interest in each other's lives. It was mechanical. He didn't want her for her personality or her body. He wanted her because she was willing and because he could use her as a means to an end. Lily didn't seem to care. She followed him like a willing accomplice, and when they entered his apartment, there was an awkward tension hanging in the air, an unspoken understanding that this wasn't about connection, but about something darker. He undressed her, and she undressed him. There was no passion, no tenderness. Their bodies touched, but there was nothing intimate about it. The physical act felt distant, detached, nothing but an exchange of motions as if they were actors in a play, both performing a role. Zach's mind was elsewhere, replaying the image of Emma's face when she'd admitted to the affair, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction when he imagined her finding out what he was doing. The way he was using Lily, it wasn't about the pleasure. It was about showing Emma that he could hurt her too. That he wasn't some naive fool. That if she could be unfaithful, so could he. The silence between them was palpable. Lily wasn't the problem, but she might as well have been anyone. The only thing that mattered was the act, the revenge. It was as if Zach had been taken over by something primal, something raw, driven by a need to get even. His body moved mechanically, not for pleasure, but for release. Lily responded with the same emptiness, a physical response that lacked all intimacy. When it was over, there was no lingering embrace. No words exchanged. It wasn't about them. It was about him. It was about showing Emma that he could betray her too, that he could hurt her just as deeply as she had hurt him. Lily dressed quickly, her face impassive. She seemed unaffected, as if it was just another one-night stand to her. Zach didn't even care. He watched her gather her things, her back to him, and he knew he wouldn't see her again. She wasn't important. She was just a tool, a way for him to deal with the pain. She left without a word, and Zach was left alone in the apartment, the silence of it all pressing down on him like a weight. His phone buzzed on the counter, snapping him out of his haze. It was Emma. She'd sent him a message. "We need to talk." Zach's fingers hovered over the screen, rage bubbling up again. He had no interest in talking. What could they possibly say? What could she say that would undo everything she'd done? The affair with Alex had broken something in him, something deep. It was too late for apologies, too late for explanations. But the message made something shift in him. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he sat there, staring at his phone, his mind racing. The revenge hadn't felt like he thought it would. The hollow emptiness of the encounter with Lily hadn't provided the release he'd hoped for. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like anything. Suddenly, he realized that the revenge wasn't going to come from some physical act. It wasn't about proving he could be just as cold, just as ruthless. The real payback, the real answer, wasn't in the bedroom. It was in how he moved forward. He didn't need to hurt her the way she'd hurt him. That wasn't going to heal him. He didn't need to match her betrayal with his own. And so, for the first time since he found out about the affair, he made a decision. He was done with the games. He didn't need to retaliate. What he needed was closure. He needed to regain control over his own life, to find a way to heal. Zach stood up, his body heavy with exhaustion, his mind full of unresolved thoughts. He walked toward the door, knowing that what he needed wasn't a vengeance-filled affair or more broken trust. What he needed was to reclaim himself. The phone buzzed again, another message from Emma. But this time, he didn't feel the urge to respond. He wasn't going to play her game anymore. He wasn't going to let her control his emotions. Zach opened the door, stepped out into the night, and left it all behind. The door swung open, and the familiar scent of Emma's perfume filled the air. I heard her footsteps first, the soft thud of her heels against the hardwood floor, and my heart jolted. I wasn't sure if I was relieved to hear her or if I dreaded what was about to happen. I had told myself I wouldn't care about her reaction. She had no right to feel anything, not after what she had done to me with Alex. But as I stood there, a part of me couldn't escape the overwhelming weight of what I was about to face. Lily had barely left, her figure still a blur as she disappeared down the hall. I didn't expect Emma to be home so soon. She had been out for a while, but something told me she'd return tonight, as if the universe was making this moment happen for a reason. I was sitting on the couch, staring into the empty space before me, when Emma's voice cut through the quiet. "Zach?" Her voice was tentative, soft. I didn't answer right away, didn't turn to face her. I could feel the tension building, the space between us thick with unspoken words. The silence stretched on for a moment, and I could hear her moving closer, the hesitation in her steps. And then, the sound of her sharp intake of breath shattered the stillness. I turned, and there she was, standing at the doorway, frozen in place. Her eyes widened as they took in the scene before her, the aftermath of the cold encounter that had just unfolded. She didn't need to say a word, her face said everything. The shock hit her like a wave, washing over her in an instant, and I could see the realization dawn in her eyes, clear as day. She couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. For a second, there was nothing but silence, an unbearable weight in the room that neither of us seemed able to lift. Her mouth parted slightly, like she was about to say something, but the words never came. Her eyes darted to the couch, then to me, then to the door where Lily had just left. She was piecing it together, and in that split second, I saw something that surprised me, the sheer shock, the devastation, as if she couldn't fathom what was happening. As if the tables had suddenly turned, and she was the one left exposed. I watched her, waiting for her to say something, but there was nothing. Nothing except the guilt. The weight of the moment pressed down on both of us, and I could feel the bitterness rise in my chest. This was what it felt like, wasn't it? The pain, the sting of betrayal. I had been so consumed by my own desire for revenge that I hadn't stopped to think about how this would affect her. But now, as I looked at her, the once confident woman who had thought she could break me with her affair, I saw the truth. She couldn't handle the weight of her own actions. The words finally came, but they weren't what I expected. "You," she faltered, her voice trembling. "You're with someone else?" I didn't answer her right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to. I needed her to sit with the reality of it, to let the sting of her own betrayal sink in. The look on her face was one of utter disbelief, an expression I recognized all too well. This was her consequence. This was the payback she had unwittingly created. The silence grew louder as Emma took a step forward, then stopped, as if she couldn't decide whether to approach me or run away. I knew she was struggling to piece together the emotions she was feeling, just as I had been hours earlier. The guilt, the humiliation, the raw realization that she had lost something far greater than she had understood. Zach, she didn't finish. I could see her shaking, her body trembling as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I wasn't surprised. After all, how could she? She'd spent months with Alex, hiding it from me, lying, convincing herself that I would never find out, that she could keep playing both sides without consequences. But now, she was looking at me, seeing me in a way she hadn't before, seeing the man she had betrayed, seeing the one person who had once trusted her more than anyone else. The anger started to build inside of me again, sharp and biting, but this time it wasn't aimed at her. It was directed inward, toward the part of me that had wanted to see her hurt, wanted to see her feel this exact moment. The bitterness I had carried for so long was starting to fade, replaced by something I didn't expect, something that felt heavier than any anger I had ever known. I didn't speak right away, letting her squirm under the weight of her own guilt. My silence spoke louder than words ever could. And when I did speak, it was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything I had been holding back. "This is what you wanted, right?" I said, my voice raw. "You wanted to hurt me, to break me, to have him instead of me. Well, here we are." Emma's face crumpled then, as if the weight of my words had shattered whatever veneer of control she had left. Her eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling at her sides as she stepped forward, unsure of what to do. "Zach, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't need to hear it. I had already heard enough lies from her." "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated bitterly. "Emma, you were planning it. You were lying to me, lying to yourself. You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you?" She collapsed onto the couch, her hands covering her face as she sobbed. The sound was heart-wrenching, but it didn't affect me the way I thought it would. I had spent too much time imagining her reaction, wishing for this exact moment, but now that it had come, I was numb. It didn't make me feel any better. It didn't fill the empty space inside me. It didn't bring me peace. It was just a hollow victory, a moment of fleeting satisfaction that couldn't undo the damage she had done. "Zach," she said, her voice breaking through her tears. "I was stupid. I made a mistake. I love you. Please don't leave me." Her words hit me, but they didn't reach the part of me that still cared. The love I had for her felt distant now, like a memory from another lifetime. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. The thought of rebuilding what we had seemed impossible. And as I stood there, staring at her broken form on the couch, I realized that maybe the only way forward was without her. The only way I could find peace was by letting go of the past, of everything she had taken from me. I turned away from her, not looking back, and walked out of the room. I could feel the heat of Emma's stare behind me as I walked out of the room. The weight of her gaze dug into my back, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. She knew what was coming. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of begging or pleading for my attention. She had done enough of that with Alex. She had used her power to manipulate and twist everything around her. But now it was my turn. I went into my study, the one place I could be alone with my thoughts. I opened the drawer and there it was. The photo. The one that confirmed everything. The photo of Emma and Alex, smiling, too comfortable with each other, a moment stolen in secrecy, taken in a place they both thought was safe. It was all there in black and white. A permanent record of her betrayal. I took a breath before walking back into the living room, where Emma was still sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands. The sobs had slowed, but the stillness in the air was palpable. It felt heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I walked toward her, and without saying a word, I handed her the photo. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at it. She didn't speak at first, just stared at the picture of herself with Alex, as if the image could somehow change, could somehow explain away the damning truth it presented. But there was no mistaking it. There was no denial left. I watched her face transform from shock to confusion, then to anger. Her hands shook as she clutched the photo tightly. "You don't understand," she finally spat, her voice shaking with a mixture of guilt and rage. "This isn't what you think it is." I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I stood there, calmly watching her unravel. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, my voice cool, steady. "I understand exactly what's been going on behind my back. All those late nights. The secret phone calls." Her eyes narrowed, and she stood up, suddenly defensive. "So what? You think you're perfect? You think you've done nothing wrong? You've been cold. Distant. We've barely even talked for months. You think this didn't have anything to do with you?" Her words stung, but I didn't let them show. I kept my eyes locked on hers, refusing to back down. She was trying to shift the blame, trying to make me the villain in this twisted narrative. But I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. "You're right," I said, my voice low and controlled. "I haven't been perfect. I've been distant. But that's because I was married to a woman who wasn't honest with me. A woman who lied, who was too busy hiding her affair to notice that I was right in front of her, trying to make things work. I admit I failed, but you," I paused, taking a breath to steady myself. "You destroyed everything. And you can't blame me for that." Emma's face contorted with frustration. "I didn't destroy anything. I didn't want to do this. I was lonely. I needed something more. Alex, he was there. He made me feel alive again. He understood me." The words sliced through me. It wasn't just the fact that she had cheated, it was the way she justified it. The way she tried to make it sound like I was the cause of her infidelity, as if I was somehow responsible for her betrayal. I had tried. God, I had tried to hold onto the pieces of our marriage, even when I could feel it slipping away. But she had already checked out. She had already made her choice. Alex had been the escape. "Lonely?" I repeated, my voice rising with the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. "Lonely? You didn't think to talk to me? You didn't think maybe we could work through it? You didn't even give me a chance. Instead, you took the easy way out. You turned to Alex, and now you're trying to make me feel like I'm the one who drove you to it." She took a step toward me, her hands balling into fists. "I never asked for you to be perfect. But I needed you to care. I needed you to see me. To really see me, Zach." Her voice broke at the end, and for a moment, I almost thought she might collapse under the weight of her own guilt. But then, just as quickly, the anger returned. "And you think you've done nothing wrong? You think I didn't notice how you've been? How you've shut me out? How you've been a stranger to me for the past year?" I took a deep breath, my chest tight with the weight of everything she was saying. I hadn't been perfect, no. I had pulled away in my own way, retreating into myself instead of fighting for us. But none of that gave her the right to betray me. None of it gave her the right to destroy our marriage like she had. "I was right here, Emma," I said, my voice unwavering. "I was right here, waiting for you to come back to me. I didn't know what was happening. You just stopped trying. I could feel you slipping away, but I didn't know why. And you," I shook my head, my throat tight with the weight of everything I was feeling. "You made your choice. You didn't even give me a chance to fight for you." Her face fell, and for a split second, I saw the faintest hint of guilt flash across her eyes. But then she blinked and the walls went back up. She wasn't done yet. "You don't get it, Zach," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but laced with venom. "You think I didn't want this? You think I didn't try? You weren't there for me. I didn't feel seen. And maybe if you had been, I wouldn't have gone to Alex. I wouldn't have had to find someone else to fill the void you left. It was the same old story. She was the victim. She had been neglected. She had needs. But I had heard it all before, and it didn't matter anymore. I was tired of her excuses. I was tired of hearing her tell me that I was the reason she'd gone down this path. She had made a choice. And now, she had to live with the consequences of that choice. "You made the decision to betray me, Emma," I said quietly, my voice steady. "And I'm not going to let you rewrite it. You can't blame me for your actions. You are just as guilty as I am. You made your choice and now you'll have to live with it. Just like I will. She looked at me then, and I saw the raw hurt in her eyes, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the hurt of someone who had been wronged, it was the hurt of someone who knew they were caught, and they didn't know how to fix it. She had nothing left to say. And I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me break. I'll pack my things tomorrow, I said, my voice flat. But for now, we're done talking. I've heard enough. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there with her guilt and her excuses. I didn't care anymore. I had said what needed to be said. The decision was made. I couldn't look at her anymore. Couldn't stand the sight of her, of the woman who had torn apart everything we'd built. The lies, the deceit, the betrayal. There was no going back from it. I wasn't going to spend another moment in a marriage that was already dead, suffocating beneath the weight of her actions. I spent the next few days in a haze of cold determination. I knew exactly what I had to do. There was no room for hesitation now. I had suffered enough. I wasn't going to let Emma manipulate me anymore. She'd been playing her games for far too long, convincing herself that her affair with Alex was a justified escape. But now, it was my turn to take control. The first thing I did was hire the best lawyer I could find. I wasn't looking for someone who would go easy on her. I wasn't looking for someone who'd be sympathetic. I needed someone ruthless, someone who knew how to play the game and win. I couldn't afford to let her have any leverage. She destroyed my trust, my peace of mind, and I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I had the lawyer draft up the divorce papers right away, detailing everything. The adultery, her manipulation, her lies. I didn't need to go into the specifics of our marriage. I didn't care about the small details, whether we had disagreements over trivial things or whether there were moments of happiness. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the truth. Emma had chosen Alex. She had shattered everything for a fleeting affair that meant more to her than our years together. I knew Emma would fight me. She was stubborn, proud, and she believed that her emotional manipulation would somehow turn the situation in her favor. But she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her twist the narrative, not this time. I'd been a fool for too long, allowing her to gaslight me into believing that I was the one at fault. No more. When I served her the papers, she was stunned. She stood there, holding the documents in her hands, her face pale. She didn't know what to say at first, and for a brief moment, I thought she might actually break down. But no, she didn't. The pride that had gotten her into this mess was still there, and it didn't take long for her to start defending herself. "You don't have to do this, Zach," she said, her voice shaking, but with a hint of defiance. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can work through it. You're just angry and I get that, but don't make this permanent. Don't let this be the end of everything we've had." I looked at her, calm and unfeeling. "There is nothing left to fix, Emma," I said, my voice cold. "You've already made your choice. You've already thrown away what we had. There's no going back from that." Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite read, anger, maybe guilt, or both, but she didn't say anything more. She simply took the papers, and I watched as she walked away, knowing that she had already started plotting her next move. The days that followed were filled with tense, lawyer-driven negotiations. Emma tried everything she could to get something out of the divorce, some semblance of control, some piece of the life we had shared. She demanded alimony, claiming that her affair had been my fault, that I hadn't been a good husband, that I had neglected her emotional needs. It was the same manipulation, the same broken record of excuses she had been using for months. But I wasn't having any of it. I met with my lawyer almost every day. We went over her demands, her requests, and we shot them down one by one. We built a case that would ensure she wouldn't get a cent from me. Every last dime she had hoped to claim was stripped away, systematically, until she had nothing left to bargain with. I wanted her to feel the consequences of what she had done. Not just the emotional fallout of the affair, but the real-world impact of her choices. She wanted to destroy me, to make me feel the pain of her betrayal. Well, now she would see what it was like to be on the other side of that. Now she would understand what it felt like to lose everything. I didn't care about the house, the possessions, or anything material. None of that mattered to me. What I wanted was to see her exposed, to see her lose the control she had always held over me. I wanted to make sure she couldn't manipulate me anymore. I wanted to tear down the image she had built, to remind her of who she really was, a liar, a cheater, someone who had destroyed the life we had. The more we worked through the divorce, the clearer it became that Emma had no real understanding of what she had done. Every time we met, every time she tried to negotiate, she continued to act as though she were the victim. She had this false belief that she could still play the role of the wronged party, the one who had been driven to desperation by my coldness. She even tried to paint Alex as some sort of hero, the man who had saved her from the emotional neglect she supposedly suffered from me. It was laughable. The way she tried to spin the narrative, to rewrite history. I saw right through it, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. One afternoon, my lawyer called me with an update. We were moving closer to finalizing the divorce. Emma was starting to back off from her demands, realizing that she didn't have a leg to stand on. But I could tell she wasn't finished yet. She was playing the long game, trying to find some angle where she could salvage something. But I was done. I had already made my peace with what had happened. The anger I had felt was slowly dissipating, replaced with a calm, almost detached resolve. I had no more time for her games. No more room in my life for the woman who had destroyed me. A few days later, I signed the final papers. I was officially done with her. The divorce was over. Emma would walk away with nothing, and it was a bitter victory. But I didn't care. She had taken everything from me once before, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of taking more. I didn't look back as I walked away from the lawyer's office. I had no reason to. Emma was a chapter in my life that had come to a close, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into writing any more of it. The hardest part was over. Now I could finally move on. The courtroom felt like a battlefield, and I was prepared for the fight. Every day was another round of strategy, of maneuvering, of watching Emma try to twist the truth and turn the tables. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I didn't know how long this battle would last. Weeks, maybe months. It didn't matter. What mattered was the endgame. I had already made up my mind, and the truth was on my side. Emma could scream, she could lie, but the evidence was irrefutable. She had crossed a line, and now she would have to pay for it. I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything. The first few court dates were draining, but they were a necessary part of the process. Each time I saw Emma in the courtroom, sitting with her lawyer, her face a mask of feigned innocence, I wanted to laugh at how absurd it all was. She had the nerve to sit there, looking like the wronged party, as though I was the one who had betrayed her. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. I stayed calm, kept my focus on the facts, and let my lawyer do the talking. Emma's lawyer was good, I'll give him that. He tried every tactic to sway the judge, painting me as a distant, neglectful husband, pushing the narrative that I had emotionally abandoned her. He even tried to use her affair as a justification for her actions, claiming that it was a result of my lack of emotional support. The audacity. But the truth, the cold, hard truth, couldn't be twisted. Emma had slept with Alex. She had lied, manipulated, and deceived, all to cover up her affair. And I had the proof. I remember the first time my lawyer pulled out the photos in front of the court. Emma went pale when she saw them. She had thought those pictures would remain hidden, that no one would ever know what she'd done. But there they were, displayed for everyone to see. I watched her face as the judge examined the photos, her eyes flicking to me in a flash of panic, then quickly darting away. It was a moment of pure vulnerability for her, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. She had no defense. The images of her and Alex, too comfortable with each other, too familiar, were the nail in the coffin. Her affair was out in the open, and there was nothing she could do to deny it. Her lawyer tried to downplay the significance of the photos, claiming they weren't inconclusive or staged. But no one was buying it. The court saw what it was, an undeniable act of infidelity. Emma's credibility was shattered. Over the course of several weeks, the hearings became more tense. Emma's desperation grew, and I could see it in her eyes. She started throwing out wild accusations, saying I was emotionally abusive, that I had neglected her needs, that I had never loved her the way she deserved. She even tried to claim that I had been physically violent. It was all lies, of course. But it was a last-ditch effort to cling to something, anything that might turn the tide in her favor. But I had been prepared. I had every piece of evidence, every text message, every email, every phone record that proved her affair wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, but a full-blown relationship. I had a detailed account of her manipulations, her lies, and her attempts to keep me in the dark while she destroyed everything behind my back. Emma tried to counter, but it was futile. The judge wasn't swayed by her attempts to paint herself as the victim. And then came the final hearing. The last chance for Emma to make her case, the last opportunity for her to fight for anything. I knew it was coming to an end. There was no more room for games. I had prepared myself for the verdict, but I could still feel the tension building in my chest as we sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to speak. The moment the judge began to read the ruling, I could see the defeat in Emma's eyes. She sat up straighter, trying to keep her composure, but I could tell that she already knew what was coming. She had lost. After considering the evidence presented, the judge began, and weighing the testimony of both parties, the court finds in favor of Mr. Zachary Whitman. It is clear that the respondent, Mrs. Emma Whitman, has committed adultery, which has irreparably damaged the marriage. In light of these findings, the court rules that the marital assets will be divided as follows. The words felt like a punch to her gut. I could see her shoulders slump, her face pale with shock. She had lost. Mr. Whitman will receive the majority of the marital assets, including the home, financial accounts, and personal property, the judge continued, and Mrs. Whitman will receive a portion of the retirement funds, as per the standard division of assets, but no alimony will be awarded, given the circumstances of the case. It was over. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I had already won. Emma's lawyer tried to object, but it was pointless. The decision had been made. Emma's attempts to manipulate the system, to use her emotions as leverage, had failed. She had been exposed, and now she had nothing left to cling to. I could see her eyes flicking toward me, searching for some hint of sympathy, some sign that I might change my mind. But I didn't offer her any. I wasn't the man she thought I was. I wasn't the fool who would forgive her for what she had done. Her face twisted in a mix of anger and disbelief as she stood up and walked out of the courtroom. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't care. When it was all over, I sat there in silence for a moment, absorbing the finality of it all. There was a sense of relief in the air, a weight lifted off my shoulders. The worst was behind me, and I could finally breathe again. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for, but it was justice. Emma had made her choices, and now she would have to live with the consequences. I stood up ready to move on. The court battle was over, but my life was just beginning. I had fought for myself, and now it was time to rebuild. Goodbye.